My name's Tony Buck. I fix houses for a living. I work in radio and do some video work. I'm also a master gardener with Penn State, although I do not represent Penn State tonight. I'm also a permaculture designer. I've done the course. There's a 12-day course to become a permaculture designer. It's a simple course, and when I heard about permaculture, some of the principles and the ideas, I said, I don't have those. I've got a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills. I love to pick up skills. So that's why I did the course. And hopefully tonight I can give you an introduction to the principles of permaculture by using the garden as an example. Now, permaculture is a contraction of permanent and agriculture. Bill Mollison, somebody from Tasmania, 40 years ago or so, looked into the forest and he said to himself, how come those trees are 200 feet tall and doing really well, and no one's doing anything about that, and I'm over here battling with a 3-foot tomato plant. You know, what's happening here? You know, and he started to question nature, ask nature for answers. So one of our permaculture principles, not a principle, but one of our key phrases is, what would nature do? 3 billion years of R&D. You might be able to improve on it for your own particular thing, but let's ask nature what it does and see if we can use that to solve our problems. So permanent agriculture would mean mimicking nature in some way, because nature is pretty much eternal in a material sense, as eternal as you can get. So Bill Mollison had a student called David Holmgren who said, this is great stuff, what you're thinking here. And together they built what we call permaculture today. And it started off about agriculture, it started off about gardening and plants and nature. But really, you can apply permaculture to anything. In the office, if you're making rockets, if you're flying an airplane, if you're doing manufacturing, you can apply permaculture. In fact, we better apply permaculture because we're moving into an unsustainable age, although we could call it the sustain age if we did it right. And the young people, a lot of young people like permaculture because they are going to inherit the future, of course, and they want it to be sustainable. And these principles can help you to do things sustainably. And as I said, we have to. So they're not just for the garden. Tonight I'm using the garden because it's something I do. And it's a nice way to illustrate it and show you the principles and discuss them a little bit. We can talk about each one of these principles one a night. We're going to go through 12 of them tonight in an hour or so. So thanks for all coming out. Before we get to the 12 principles of permaculture, there are 3 ethics: earth care, people care, and fair share. Now, people are pretty important, so you'd think, well, people should be first maybe on that list, but actually, without the earth, there are no people. So we better take care of the earth first, right? Take care of the food first. They say when you're on an airplane, if the oxygen goes, you take care of the child first. No?
No, you don't.
No, you don't. You take care of yourself first, because you can take a little while to take care of the child, right? So in a way, I always see that as like part of it. It's like, it seems selfish that we would take care of people. I don't think they're exactly literal, but without earth, there's no people, right? And then if there's a surplus from what you do, or if there's a benefit, share it. Instead of throwing it into the sea, dumping it into the sea, or you know, preventing others from getting it to keep the price up, in a human world, I think we would share our surpluses. I think we would share our knowledge. So that's what fair share is about, and it's also about justice, which there's a lot of injustice in the food system, there's a lot of injustice in the world. There's a lot of people trying to create scarcity. There is no scarcity. There's 40% food waste in the world. There's 7 billion people, there's 40% food waste. If we weren't wasting, there'd be more food for everybody else. So there's a tremendous abundance here. We just have to design our way into the future, and that's what permaculture is about. It's actually a design methodology for creating sustainable habitation, okay? So instead of just reacting to chaos, most permaculture people are trying to design their way into the future. anticipate the problem and design for that, okay? So the 12 permaculture principles, let's get right on with them. First one, observe and interact. By taking time to engage with nature, we can design solutions that suit our particular situation. So, here's the back of my house. Very simple house in Coatesville, in a city, sits on 1/10 of an acre. Ask yourself, if you have a house, or even if you don't, where is the sun? Which way does my house face? Does it face south, north, east, or west? Well, why would I care? Well, if you're gonna build a house, you might put more windows on the south side, so the sun comes in and gives you passive heat. Our houses, if you look around, are designed to fit the street. They face the street, they don't face the sun. So where's the wind coming from on your property? Is that important? Why? Well, what if all the windows are on the windy side? You know, in winter, that really brutal storm, all the wind's going to be pushing in through those windows. Why would you put all the windows on the windy side? Designing, again, thinking ahead. Where's the fire coming from? If there's a fire in your neighborhood or close to you, is it going to get your house? Is it going to ruin you? If you have a farm, is the fire going to come up the hill through the forest? If there was a fire, where would it be? Is there something you can do to contain that? Maybe you cut a break in the trees. So, you know, are you conscious of these things? If you have a property, all these principles, these 12 principles, you already do them to some extent in your life, okay? This isn't like brand new words you've never heard of before. What we want to do in permaculture is have these principles in our consciousness. So we're totally aware of them as we move into a situation. So if you go into a situation, you look through the filter of these 12 principles, you will design the situation better for your living, for your life, for the future, for the planet, for the children. Where's the sheltered areas on your property? Why would you want that? Well, there might be some sensitive plants you'd like to plant, or you might want to put up a structure that you don't really want to get hit by the wind, like a greenhouse. If it was put in the full wind, when you get that big wind, you might lose your greenhouse. So you might put the greenhouse in a sheltered area. You might put the pets in a sheltered area, so they don't have to take the wind and the cold or whatever. Where's the public view? I took the fence down at the back of my property so people could see the garden, so it could inspire people, because we're so distant now from the food system. And I want people to see food growing in my yard. Where are the private areas in our world? We need privacy. We need to turn off sometimes, don't we? We need private time with our family. So observe and interact wherever you are, whether you're at the office, whether you're in your garden, on your farm, on holiday somewhere, whether you own a factory or you're manufacturing. Observe and interact. It's very important. By observing and interacting, this is my back porch. It was just a random old porch, but I managed to buy a couple of $100 worth of glass from a auction. That's just a couple of hundred, because I do home improvement for a living. I can do this cheaply. I glassed it in. I said, this is a south-facing porch. Let me mention a minute where the sun goes in summer. In summer, the sun gets up in the east, sometimes a little bit north of east, just a little bit, and it goes straight over the top. If you imagine this is my house, straight over the top, and it drops down a little bit north of west. It's a parabola, but it goes up tight, right? In the winter, look at this. This is the sun. This is what the sun does in winter. It's hard to believe. It's about this low in winter, crossing over. It's banging straight into that porch. The sunlight is coming halfway up the wall in that porch, which is painted blue, to heat up the aluminum in my porch. 6-7 hours a day, the sun is banging into that porch, heating it up to 80 degrees. There's a fan in there with a thermostat, and it sucks air into my house and warms the house. And it circulates back through the kitchen door. So in winter, you may never have noticed, but the sun is here. It's so low, and that's a grace to me. It comes down to the south, and it comes in through the windows, which is why you really want to observe and interact how your property sits and how you can take advantage of that sun. And it goes right over the top in summer. Consequently, this porch gets very little sun. It just hits the bottom of the glass there. And it's no warmer, because I've glassed it in summer, than it would be if it was totally open. In fact, because I insulate the roof, it's cooler. So observe and interact. And if you do that, you realize, oh, I can put some food on my porch in the winter. This is the porch from inside last winter. There's some kohlrabi growing there. There's some celery. There's some kale. These are planters, totes that you use for laundry. And I've got them all planted along there. And I'm eating that food. That's January this year. I'm eating kale right through the year. In fact, I just ate my last kale from what I planted in September. Through the winter. The kohlrabi didn't like it too much. The celery did all right, but you experiment. Mainly I do greens now on the porch. That's winter food for me because I observed and interacted and realized this porch is like a boon for me.
How do you do drainage in those containers?
I'll tell you a secret. They're actually wicking planters. So in other words, there's a white pipe here. And I water it through the pipe, and it waters the base of the planter. And I control how much water I put in. But I put in about this much water in the base, and I water from below. And I only have to pour that in every 2 weeks. So that's how I control it. There's no holes in the bottom, you're right. But I'm just on top of it, I'm on top of it. So number 2 is catch and store energy. By developing systems that collect resources when they are abundant, we can use them in times of need. Sounds obvious, we try to save money so that we can have it in time of a disaster. Well, there's lots of other things we can store, especially energy. And what is energy? Well, the car runs on gasoline, right? What do we run on? Oxygen? Yes, we do run on oxygen, that's true. Sugar. But food. Our fuel is food, right? Whether it's industrial agriculture food, which is, if you're only eating that, you're probably dying slowly. Of course, we're all dying slowly, that's a fact. But if you get born, you're going to die slowly. So, but really good food, or organics, food you grow yourself, that's our energy. Our tank needs food. So you can actually grow energy on your property. Right? The energy you need, which is more important than the car. If there was a really big earthquake tonight and everything fell down and the electricity went off, you wouldn't be thinking about, oh, let's go rebuild that bridge over there. You'd be saying, where's my next meal? Right? That's the most important thing in your life, really. And all those around you is, where's our next meal? Because in 2 or 3 days, we're not doing too good without any of this fuel. So you can grow energy in your garden. This is a little cold planter I've cut there. I've got food growing there, obviously. Another energy you could do is, this is clover growing here. I plant clover when my soil is bare. When I pull up my plants, I plant clover. It's called a cover crop. Earth hates to be bare. The soil hates to be bare. Have you noticed? What grows first when you leave the soil?
Weeds.
Weeds come up real quick. You hate them, but actually they're our friends. Without weeds, we wouldn't be here. Why? Because it holds the soil back. It stops it from washing into the ocean or into the river. It's very important. Nature knows how important the soil is, so it brings up weeds immediately. The first colonization, we call it. And then you get the weeds that will colonize an area, hold the soil back. And then you'll get the second, well, give me the word. Generation.
Wave.
Succession, thank you. You get the second succession. So what the earth does is successions. Weeds in the first succession, second succession, shrubs, little bushes. The next succession is higher trees, maybe apples, plums, and then you get the oaks. And then you get the massive trees, well, oaks are massive, all kinds of trees. The earth is always trying to get to a forest. It's always trying to get there. We keep stopping it, we keep cutting it down. We're fighting nature all the time. So in permaculture we have a thing called forest gardening, which isn't a garden in a forest, it's designing a piece of land that gets to a forest, but it's an edible forest. We encourage it to get to a forest. It's an edible forest. It has useful trees for growing, for building stuff, for fuel maybe, for your fire. So you'll hear the word more and more in the future of that. So clover I plant in my garden just on bare soil. And why do I do that? It's a legume. And the legume can take nitrogen from the air and put it into its roots, and the microbes in the soil will take the nitrogen into the soil. So you're actually putting nitrogen instead of going out and buying it. It's at the fertilizer store. So you're actually catching and storing energy. And then you can plow this in afterwards, and it'll give you a whole other nutrient base into your soil. What's this little thing here? I have one to pass around. This is a mason bee nest box. I make them. We have, I forget, is it 500 native bees species in Pennsylvania? There's 3,000 in the country. Imagine 500 native bees, some of them you've never seen, most of them you've never seen. You may never see any of them and realize what they were. The honeybee came from Europe. Shouldn't even be here. That's the one we're all worried about. Shouldn't even be. It's an invasive, really. It's useful. They bought it because they wanted honey. But the mason bee is a local bee. It doesn't make holes like the carpenter bee. Don't mix it up with the carpenter bee. It's not that nasty boy who's trying to destroy your porch. This one, she's looking for holes. And she's going to lay her children in the holes. This guy comes out in March, April, May, and will pollinate anything that can fly.
And what do they look like?
They're little honeybees. They're
Okay.
like little honeybees, not quite so yellowy coloured, but and there's a sweat bee, and there's all these other kinds of bees that sort of very similar. The mason bee is called that because she lugs the hole over when she laid her children in, so that others won't go in and steal the pollen. But by putting these mason bee boxes, these are some I made with children in our city about 3 years ago, they decorated them. By putting them up in your yard, you're encouraging mason bees and sweat bees and little bees, native bees, to live in your yard. When that thing gets filled up, and it does every year, four bees will come out of each hole. 4 times 30 is 120 bees now I have in my yard, pollinating the heck out of it, improving my harvest. That's catching and storing energy. How long would it take us to go around with a brush and pollinate all our plants? These guys are going to do it for you. Put some habitat up for them. So you might not think of catching and storing energy in that way. So what I've just described, you could try and apply that to your office work or whatever you do in your life. Is there a way you can catch and store energy that you haven't thought about, the obvious ways? But this is another way that, as I say, can be applied to just about anything. Catch and store energy. This is a straw bale. I use it for mulching around the plants. Why would I do that? To stop the weeds. I don't want to waste my energy picking up weeds, pulling out weeds, if there are any. If you plan your garden from the start, you won't have weeds. I don't have weeds. But I also mulch just because there'll be a few, Now, don't mix straw with hay in your mind. Hay is grass that's been cut for fodder. It contains seeds, grass seeds. It's basically grass. Straw is the stalks of a cereal, like wheat. So they've taken the cereal seeds off, and the stems are left, and that's straw. There should be no seeds in straw. If you try and buy a bale of straw, and you see lots of seeds in it, don't buy it. Because you're going to lay them on your garden, and you're going to have great big stalks of wheat, which is really a grass. And they're big, So you want but anyway, you got the point. Use mulches to catch and store energy. Use mulches to prevent yourself from having to use your energy. That's another way one might not think of catching and storing energy. Catch and store energy. Here's someone who's used cardboard, regular cardboard, around some of their plants. This is kale, and maybe there's a green pepper there or something like that. It's untidy, but in a food garden, it might not bother you. This is just regular cardboard. Cardboard is carbon. It will break down. It will break down in your garden and add to the carbon content of your garden. So this is preventing a lot of weeds. Here's the grass, look. If that cardboard wasn't there, that would be in there. So that person has, I know it's not me, but that's one way of doing it, using cardboard, using some kind of mulch.
So tell me,
Yes.
do you plow that under the carpet?
Well, this is a home garden, so there'll be no plowing. You just pull it off in winter or leave it there. Might as well leave it there because you don't want bare soil. And then just plant through it or move it out of the way. I personally don't till my yard ever. I only till it for potatoes. I have to dig trenches for potatoes, but everything else, every year I just pull back stuff, soil, whatever, plant something. I never dig it up. For 6 years I've not dug my garden. There's no need, if you're not stepping in it, and there's no weeds. Nature knows how to make soil better than we do. We come along and dig it all up and disrupt it, but it has a structure. It has air, it has water passages. The microbes have all started working in there. It's perfect. Nature knows how to make soil. You don't. So once you've established it, don't walk in it. I never walk in. I have raised beds. That's one thing I like about raised beds. They keep me out of them. And you don't want to be compacting your soil, because if you do, you'll have, the roots can't move. You'll have a lower yield. And the roots just can't spread the way they should. And the nutrition can't spread the way it should. Because you want a lot of the air in your soil. And then you want those water passages and the microbe passages and all those little things, so the nutrients can move and flow easily, and the roots can pick it all up. So don't walk in food growing areas, walk around them. It's hard to stretch more than 2 feet, so no path should be more than 2 feet from the center of a bed, say, because you won't reach 3 feet. It's very difficult. You'll hurt your back. So don't compact food growing soil. You can compact around flowers a little, but even flower beds, try not to walk in them. You can use the plank. I saw a Victorian picture, a woman with a big crinoline dress, Victorian dress, and she was holding a plank. And I thought, what's she doing? In the next picture, she laid the plank into her bed, and she was walking on the plank, spreading the load. 1890, this picture. Lady in full dress, Victorian dress, weeding in the garden on a plank. They knew about that then. So, number 3, obtain a yield. Yes. Whatever you do, try and obtain a yield. I know we do volunteer work and we don't actually want a financial yield, but we get a love yield, I think, from doing volunteer work. We get a yield. So always get a yield. And if there's a choice of different things, then ask yourself, can I get the 3 benefits rule? Which is, can I get 3 benefits from everything I do? And if there's something that only gives 1 benefit, and this one gives 3, then pick the 3. If you need to, this is a sunflower growing in my yard, and what's the yield there?
Beauty.
Beauty? Beauty could be the yield. Beauty is a yield.
Food.
So look at the pattern in there. We'll get on to patterns in a moment. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? You see that repeated in nature all the time, don't you? The patterns. If you use nature's patterns, if you can learn them, and design, if you're a designer, design from patterns to details, we say. We'll get onto that in a moment. The patterns in nature please us. They've evolved over billions of years, and they please us. We love them. We don't always recognize them, but learn to recognize patterns. The yield from the sunflowers is a seed, of course. I can eat it myself. I give it to the birds. And then it goes back to the compost heap. So obtain a yield. Whatever you do, obtain a yield. Because you're putting in work, you're putting in effort, and what's it for? Ask yourself, why am I doing it? So, number 4, apply self-regulation and accept feedback. This is, I would say, psychologically the hardest one, because it's about us. Apply self-regulation. Can I be self-regulated? And more importantly, can I accept feedback from the system? We are societally wise, we are not receiving feedback. We are not obeying the feedback from our world right now. We're killing our world, we're polluting it, we're taking too many resources. This consumer society we have cannot go on, because if the rest of the world lives like we do, we'll need 4 planets. We have to accept the feedback and change our systems. And we can still live with abundance. So we need to discourage inappropriate activity, ensure that systems can continue to function well. What I'm doing today, will that allow the system to function later on? And accepting feedback is if a friend says, you're really boring, and he stops or she stops calling you, and you have to say, well, they gave me the feedback, but I didn't believe it, really. So maybe I am a bit boring. So accept the feedback. Allow yourself to have feedback. It's okay. I'm not perfect. It's really actually a great relief when you find out you're not perfect. It really is. You go, oh God, I'm not perfect. That means, okay, good. I can improve. If you don't accept feedback, you can't improve. If you can't improve, how human do you want to be? Most people aren't very human from what I've seen. We need to do a lot of work on this human thing. What is an enlightened being? What is that like? You know, I've seen one in my life. It's an amazing thing, and I'm not that. So there's work to be done. And if we accept feedback, we can evolve. We can evolve like everything we're talking about. We need to evolve too. So I had to evolve with this. Somebody asked me to do a solar dehydrator for a class. So I did one. I made 3. This is the final thing. Yeah, it works. It works, but you've got to go out and move it with the sun, or I could make it move, but then how much do you want to pay for this thing? $50, they said. So, you know, I can't, so you've got to go out and move it. You've got to make this thing so tight an ant can't get in there. That's hard to do, you know, those ants are really persistent. So I made it, I did the class, and then I said, don't do this. Do not do this. The feedback is get a Excalibur dryer, plug it in, and dry things this way. Because tomatoes need to dry overnight, otherwise they'll go moldy. You can dry herbs in that, but you can't dry wet stuff like tomatoes in that. They'll go moldy too soon. It won't, you'll be lucky if you get a 1 day dry. So buy a little electric thing. I don't even see an uptick on my bill. You can use this. They're great little things. Don't get one with 10 stacks unless you're commercial, because it takes so long to fill the trays. I had a 4 tray, 15 minutes, I got it filled. Drying tomatoes, drying peaches, whatever comes out of the garden.
And is that, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, is that what it's
That's what's-
for?
Yeah, it's a dehydrator. It's for the Excalibur. This is cost you about $100. I dry pounds and pounds of tomatoes every year. I actually don't like fresh tomatoes. I found out I like dry. Yeah, and peaches. What else I do? Mangoes. If mangoes are cheap at the health food store, I buy 10, and I come home and I dry them in there. They don't last long. There's somebody in my house eating all these dried mangoes. They don't last long at all. But I accepted the feedback. In principle, this is good. You know, if you live in the Middle East, in the middle of a desert, and you've got this roof, and you've got some linen, and there's not too many flies or ants around, you can dry stuff on the roof like they do. And grandma's home, she's got nothing to do. But this doesn't work for us. So apply self-regulation, accept feedback. I had a peach tree growing, two of them self-planted right back there. I let them go. Then I realized, oh, when summer came, I didn't have a summer picture for you. They blocked half, this is the yard, the lane at the back of my house. They blocked the lane. The reason I took the fence down was so children and people could look in and see my yard, see food growing. The peach tree blocked the view, like this. So accept self-regulation, accept feedback, apply self-regulation. I took the trees down. Didn't want to. They were giving me peaches, but they were blocking a view. Took them down, gave them to a friend. Small examples, again, at your work, whatever you do, your college, wherever you are, apply self-regulation, accept feedback. What's the system telling you? What is it saying to correct? You might be all right for this week, and right now we're using fossil fuels like there's no tomorrow. But in the future, in 40 years, fossil fuels are pretty much gone. The easy stuff's gone. It'll be very expensive. Why not slow down on fossil fuels now so the kids have some, so they can fly somewhere in 30, 40 years? We're going to use it all up. And guess what happens in 30 or 40 years? There's 9 billion people. And right now, fossil fuel, oil, most people are eating oil. Have you ever thought of that? NPK, all these fertilizers, many of them are made from natural gas and oil. So most people are eating oil. So the oil's gone in 40 years. You can't travel, you can't fly, you can't grow food the way we do now. And now there's 2 billion extra people to feed. So shouldn't we get started right now on non-industrial agriculture, where we take care of the land, where we do what nature does in the forest, where we self-regulate, and we accept the feedback, and realize we have to change now. These systems need to change now. They can't change in 40 years. It's too late. So, moving on. Use and value renewable resources and services. That's part of what I was just saying. Make the best use of nature's abundance to reduce our consumptive behavior and dependence on non-renewable resources. So rain. Have you ever thought of this? The average home is 1,500 square feet. In a 1-inch storm, 900 gallons are falling on your roof alone. Not your property, your roof. 900 gallons. People say to me, what, when I get a water talk, I give, water harvesting talk. Somebody in the audience always shouts out, why does my barrel fill up so quickly? This barrel is 60 gallons. Barrels are 60 gallons. 60 into 900,
Yeah.
what is that, 15? 15 barrels in a 1-inch storm, which is a good storm. We don't always have a 1-inch storm, but that's a good storm, and we had one the other day. 900 gallons. In PA, we get 44 inches a year. That's nearly 40,000 gallons falling on your roof of your house a year. I use about 12,000 from the water company. Well, I must be a fool. I pay $50 a month, and there's 40,000 gallons falling on my roof. Use and value renewable sources and services. If I have 4 teenagers at home, which I don't, that water will be going through the toilets. that roof water will be going through the washing machine. As it is, it waters my garden. I save 200 or 300 gallons in the garden at all time. But look at this. It's such. So when I got to my house, all the downspouts were facing the street, all going down the street. I brought them all onto my property. We're all doing that. It's all going down the river. It's washing the river. It's flooding people in Chad's Ford. It's destroying the river. It's making the fish impossible to swim and live. It's chewing up the river where all the nutrition is. It's totally destroying our environment, the way we handle water. And it's so simple to solve it. It's so simple. So, use and value resources. What goes in must come out. So we've just had a 1-inch storm. We're having a 1-inch storm. 60 gallons is like 10 minutes. And then it overflows and continues.
Did you make that?
Sorry?
Did you make that,
The what?
the system?
Yeah, the barrel. Yeah, you just bring your downspout into the top.
Yeah, but I mean, you have that overflow.
Oh yeah, put the overflow on. And it needs a bigger overflow, to be honest with you. That can't handle it. If it's really pouring down, it's going to spill over the top anyway, because that little hose isn't going to be enough.
Do you collect the overflow?
I do. Actually, that doesn't go to the street. That goes into my yard. So I use a big 4-inch pipe, and I connect it to that, and I bring it out, and I resurface it in the middle of the grass. I resurface it. And I also let it disperse up the ground a little bit, drill some holes in it. Anybody got questions, by the way, ask as we go along, because at the end we just might not have time. Try not to bog me down, but don't let, if you've got a question, just put your hand up, let's get it done, okay? So yeah, you can let it overflow, and I've got plenty of garden here where it can overflow. It's not going into my basement. You don't want it to go into your basement. In fact, I have no basement right there. So use and value renewable sources. This is another thing. Here's something I use. This is actually better than a barrel in some ways. You put this in your downspout. There it is. Putting it in. And you connect a hose to it, and you can take the hose off to anywhere in the yard. Right? You can take this hose 20 feet to your favorite tree or planter. Or you can drill holes along the way, which is what I do, and I block the end. And then water comes out all different places along the yard. And somebody said to me, well, isn't enough rain falling? I said, well, there isn't actually. But though we get 44 inches a year, if you dig down after a 1-inch storm, often the rain hasn't even penetrated. So in some places, especially where I grow food, I want a lot more water. And this is one way to do it. You can pass this around. You can get these online at homedepot.com. They don't sell them in the store. And there's different sizes. Very simple. That's a piece of hose from my house, but it just fits in the downspout. It's a way of taking some of that water, putting it where you want it in the garden.
So how does it work though? Why would it, instead of going down, why would it go horizontally?
The way it works is it's coming down the downspout,
Yeah,
which is wrapping around like this.
yeah.
And there's a little reservoir here,
Oh, okay.
and it fills the reservoir and then
I
pours
see.
out through the pipe. And if there's too much, it overflows anyway
Mhm.
and continues going. You can put one of these on every downspout.
What's the name of it?
Sorry, it's
The
called
name?
Catch a Raindrop. Catch a Raindrop.
Could you just put a soaker hose on
A soaker hose is meant for 40 pounds pressure.
it? Okay, so it's.
So that's why I drill holes in them.
Okay.
I'm sorry, was it?
No, that's
I'm
all right,
doing
I'm
a
just
face.
looking at it.
Yeah, have a
You
good
can
look.
pass it on.
Pass it around, you know. Yeah, so that's called catch a rain. Again, we're trying to catch value renewable resources, and rain is a huge resource. We're gonna have too much rain here. California's gonna dry up, and we're gonna get flooded out. May this year was 7 inches of rain. I don't know if you grow food, but I had slugs, like I could have fed half of the world with the slugs in my yard. If you could. Yeah.
How are you doing with mulching? I mean, slugs, if it's wet, that's always a problem for me.
Yeah, I don't mulch at all. I don't mulch. I plant so close together that I keep the weeds out, and I don't have any weeds anyway
Oh, you do square
in my yard.
foot
Wow.
gardening.
Sorry?
You do square foot gardening?
I do square foot
Yeah.
gardening, that principle, everybody know that, you know, you can divide your bed into square feet. It helps to make it into square feet, so then you plant something in each square foot. And if it grows too big, just pull it out or trim it or something. But basically shade out everything else. Just plant so intensively you shade out. Now, if you've got a very weedy garden, here's what you do to get a weed-free garden. You put in 4 pieces of wood to make a raised bed, right? You put cardboard over the grass or the weeds, and you bring new soil in on top. You bring compost in, mushroom compost, whatever you can get that's weed-free, and you put 6 to 8 inches in your bed. What's below the cardboard? The weed seeds will rot. They will be down there for a couple of years, they won't see light, they won't come up, you won't have any weeds.
I just use newspaper.
You can use, this lady uses newspaper. You can use 6 to 8, 10 sheets of newspaper you'll need, or you can use cardboard. And if you want to plant something deep, then just break through the cardboard. But in a couple of years that will rot and become part of the garden, it's carbon, and all your weed seeds were kept down, they didn't germinate, you have a weed-free garden. That's how we do it. So, produce no waste is number 6 on my sheet. By valuing and making use of all the resources available to us, nothing goes to waste. Nature makes no waste. Think about that. Nature makes no waste. In the forest, it's all that debris coming down, all those leaves. They're going down to the ground. They're forming this layer of mulch, right? The tree is actually a little selfish. We like trees, but it's trying to stop anything else growing under it. So it gets all the nutrition. So first of all, it's smothering the ground. But what happens in that layer of leaves? You get all this fungus growing. And the fungus starts to break down the leaves, which is very nutritious. And it falls down below. And what's under the leaves? Last year's leaves. All kinds of muck and soil and worms are living under those leaves. Worms are consuming those leaves. Worms are pooping under those leaves. That's called vermiculture. It's probably 10 times more nutritious than compost. So this tree has got this whole fungal thing going. It's got vermiculture going on, and below that is like years of beautiful soft soil, compost. Everything's happening down there. Tremendous nutrition. It's bringing all the water down through its leaves and all the branches, and it's dropping leaves, and it's dropping other kinds of nutrition, pollen, and it's dropping flowers, and the birds are in the trees, and they're pooping, and there's phosphorus coming down from their poop. So this is really an incredible system. There's no waste in that forest. When we say waste in permaculture, we mean, yeah, the tree makes waste, but it's used up, it's consumed, it becomes part of the system, it's food for the next episode, whatever is happening. How can we do that, where we don't make this horrendous plastic waste, for instance, which nothing can use? So somebody came up with a theory, what was it called? It was an architect, he said, cradle to grave. So if you make something, it has to serve something, and then something, and it's used all the way through the system. We have to start thinking like that, and we can do that. My friend came back from Ireland, and she bought compostable plastic bags. Have you seen them here? This is America. I haven't seen them here. Compostable shopping bags, plastic bags. I mean,
No,
come on.
doggy poop
The garbage
bags.
bag.
Somebody has them?
We have doggy poop bags that are.
Okay. Yeah, so we can do this, we can do all this, but everything, we don't want any waste. There's so much waste in the world that we've produced, which won't break down. It's gonna come back to get us, it hasn't got us yet. It's like the tail of the scorpion. At some point, it's gonna bang us on the head. This was in the book, help me, 1972 book, Limits to Growth. Incredible book. Everything they said in that book is true. So the limits to pollution, there's a limit to pollution. As you know, there's a plastic bag, what could you call it, flotilla in the Pacific, the size of Connecticut.
What?
Plastic bags, plastic,
Flotilla?
it's like a huge island of plastic that's fallen off the boat. When these containers fall off the boats, there was one full of ducks, plastic ducks. Tens of thousands of plastic ducks are floating around the Pacific in these huge flotillas of plastic. We should really make ships to go out and pick them up and process it somehow. We have to do this at some point. So produce no waste if you can. Use as little waste as you can. Do you know, I went to a talk the other day called Your Rivers on Drugs.
Oh, yeah.
Every river in the country contains every drug we take, every drug. It even contains sunblock. Sunblock is one of the worst things in our rivers. That's why fish don't get sunburned. So much sunblock in the river. Yes.
Just one question that comes from seeing the picture you chose for this slide. Right now in our backyard, we have a freshly collected stack of weeds. I just did weeding across the entire back and front yard. There is a pile of weeds which is about this tall and about 3 feet wide. It's essentially a 3 feet
Cubic
side
yard.
cube.
Yeah.
Of exclusively weeds that
Okay.
pull the roots of everything.
Yeah.
What can I do with it outside of just putting it in bags and wait for the next yard waste collection?
No, don't do that. Don't give away your biomass. That we do. In the future, people will not give away their biomass. There will be a shortage of soil. I thought peak oil was going to be the problem, which it is, but peak soil is more important than peak oil. This is what we're going to do. See this? This is the weeds that you've grown. These aren't weeds, actually these are like old cucumber plants and stuff. And between green and brown, green is nitrogen and brown is carbon. So the woody parts are carbon-like, and the green stuff, or grass clippings and so on, are nitrogen. When you get a nice mix of that, and the percentages don't make any difference. You sort of want a 50-50. When you look at it, you want 50 carbon, 50 nitrogen. It's not really 50-50, but that's what it looks like. Don't worry about getting it perfect. It needs some air, and it needs woody stuff, and it needs brown and green. And if you get a cubic yard going, which is what you need, about a cubic yard to get a compost heap going. What do I mean by going? I'll explain. Here's my compost setup one year. The compost heap was here. So here's your cubic yard of weeds. When it starts to compress down and gather, to get compost, it's not the worms and the centipedes. When you look in there and you think they've done all that, they don't do the work. To get compost, you have to have a bacterial reaction. So the stronger the mass, the heavier the mass in this cubic yard, the better. It has to be a little bit damp. It has to have air. It's aerobic, it needs air. And what happens is, those worms and centipedes, they get out of there. Why? That thing starts to heat up. In the core of your compost heap, the bacteria start a civilization, just like us. But they overdo it, just like we are. And they just destroy themselves. But they reach 150 degrees, 160 degrees Fahrenheit in the core of that pot. And when they do that, they eat all the weed seeds. The weed seeds break down, sorry, they don't eat them. They break down, and you get this transformation from weed and woody stuff and green stuff. You get that. When you clear away the stuff that hasn't composted, the outer layer, you get this amazing core of compost. And the way you get compost is that bacterial reaction. When you open it up, usually all the worms and centipedes have gone, hey, check this out. And you open it up and you think they did it. They didn't do it. They got out of there because it was too hot for them. But they come back and they add to it, of course. So what I do is I take the compost core, I take the junk from the outside, or stuff that didn't get compost, I put it on the next compost heap. And I take the core and I made this rotary sieve, compost sieve. And then it drops down here, which I call black gold. Right? This is the compost. Weed-free, pathogen-free, because it's gone through that heating process for a couple of weeks at 150, 160 degrees. That's what compost is. That's what real compost is.
And what do you filter out when you do that? The
Well, yes.
parts that haven't
all the twigs and things like that didn't compost. I just want it to be fine. I don't want to throw all those twigs on my yard, on my garden, because they just get in the way. They need to be broken down a bit more. And there may be, some of them may be, could start a plant. You know, some roots will start a plant, like a dandelion root just start another plant, things like that. So I'm just filtering out the big stuff, the uncomposted stuff. That's my.
So 2 or 3 weeks, you told me in the summer.
In the-
It's longer than that to create a compost.
It takes it longer than that, but that core at 160 degrees goes for 2 to 3 weeks or something like that. It doesn't go for much
Right.
longer. It can't keep it up. But then you leave it. You know, that's 6 months. That takes 6 months. But the core of that bacterial reaction is probably only 2 to 3 weeks.
Do you need to provide water for this to work? Because right now, for example, since it's been sunny for the most part,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure all the weeds I have stacked are all dry probably by now.
They may be, but I water mine. I do water mine.
Okay, so you do.
And when it's done, when it's cooked, I cover it with a tarp because I don't want the rain to take the nutrition away. It'll spread it, because I put it in the middle of the garden, so even if it does wash away, it washes into the garden. But actually, I want to control that. So once it's cooked, I cover it, if I'm not ready to process it. But yes, occasionally I water my, I'll show you another one. So-
You churn it too? Do you
No,
churn it?
no, I don't, that's
It's
turning.
a lot of work.
Yeah, I don't turn. Once you got it there, you got it.
I don't either, but I just.
Nature doesn't turn in the forest.
And also that 3-foot high pile will shrink down, like, in a year, it'll probably only be like an inch or two tall, like, it's, most of it's air.
Well,
Take
I really
rocks.
compacted that a lot.
Try to compact it as much as you can, because like
I did.
he says, it will shrink down, and you want to keep about a cubic yard mass. That's what you need to make compost. If it's 2 feet, it might not create compost. If you want, you can put it in a plastic bag and make holes in the side of the plastic bag. That's what these commercial containers do. So they keep it together a bit more, and the sun hits the plastic bag and heats it up. But yeah, I try and get as much in there, and I pack it down. You'll still have lots of air in there, but you don't want it to get just wet. That's anaerobic, and that won't produce compost. You need air, the creatures in there need air, the bacteria needs air. You want air, nice airy thing, you know, but it does need to be damp. And here's another way, this is called hugelkultur, which is a German word, I believe, and it means man culture. But we're using the word hugelkultur in permaculture because it's kind of funky. Hugelkultur, remember that word? What's hugelkultur? Well, there's this more stubborn stuff that doesn't like to break down, which is logs, right? If you've got a bit of a property, there's some logs, and you can throw grass and leaves and stuff on top of the logs, and slowly they'll break down. So this is a long-term compost heap, really, man culture. And if you have enough, I don't have much property, so I can't really have too many of these. It would be rather ugly to have sort of all these mounds around my property. So this is what I did with that one. I thought I'd make it look a little bit designer. This is designer hugelkultur. And what is this? One of our phrases for permaculture is turn the problem into a solution. Turn the problem into the solution. In fact, you'll see in a minute, we say the problem is the solution. So what was the problem? I had a problem. I had a Norway maple in my fencing, and I had to get rid of it because it was falling. So we cut it down, but she leaves a lot of seeds. If you know Norway maples, they leave a lot of seeds. So you have all these little Norway maple saplings in the hedgerow, and they were really bothering me. And I said, well, how can I turn that problem into a solution? Well, I've got this hugelkultur thing going, and I thought, I'll just weave these, I'll cut these stakes down. I'm not concerned with them. So I cut them down, and I just wove them. This is called hurdling. Back from England where I grew up, we did a lot of hurdling. You stick sticks in and just weave them through. It makes it look pretty cool, doesn't it? So that's a hugelkultur. I throw my coffee grinds from the local coffee shop. I throw everything on there. Everything from kitchen waste, grass, everything. What else? I broke up some drywall and threw it on there, because that's lime. And that mixes in and gives some nutrition, also calcium, magnesium in drywall.
Like any drywall?
Yeah, most drywalls, not any. There's some stuff that came from China that was rather bad. It had asbestos in it, I think. But most drywall, you can break it up and try and pound it in a bucket with water and just sprinkle it around the garden. Try and do that in the fall and try and break it up real good because you want it to spread out. But on the hugelkultur, just chug it in there. That's going to take a few years to break down anyway, right? So there'll come a time when we don't go give away our biomass. We'll hold on to it because biomass is food.
Do you put any manure in your permaculture? Or
If I had some manure, I might.
You could come to my house.
What have you got?
I have horses.
Horses. The trouble with manures, first of all, well, in humiculture they'd be fine. But if you just take, you want them to break down for at least a year,
Yeah,
if not longer, because they will eat the thorns and things like that. I don't know about horses, but cows will eat thorns.
no horses don't.
And you can end up with seeds in the manure that you don't want in your garden. So I know somebody who spread cow manure all over their garden, next thing they have a garden full of thorn.
Wow.
Yeah. So you've got to make sure that animal manure, I'd say 2 years before I'd use it. Just so that all the seeds in there died and things like that.
What about dog poop? They don't eat thorns.
Their dog poop you can't use because they eat meat. Animals that eat meat, you don't want that in the garden at all.
So you don't throw your meat?
No, I don't eat
food
meat.
waste in-
Actually, I should say that I'm a vegetarian 35 years. So don't throw meat or dairy products, animal products in compost. Actually, you can if it's going to be sitting there long enough. I mean, I know a lady, she has a farm and she had such a big compost operation, she threw a dead deer into the compost. And within a year, you couldn't see it. So you can throw a dead deer into your composting if you want, as long as you're going to leave it long enough. But generally, I don't have any animal products, so everything from the kitchen goes in. Some people say it takes too long to break down. I think it adds nutrition. I think oranges add nutrition in the end. They take time to break down. But just keep bringing them back, eggshells, things like that.
Oh, that's what I was gonna ask about, eggshells.
Yeah, eggshells are okay.
Calcium.
Eggshells like that, but not poop from animals that eat meat. There's pathogens, there's all kinds of stuff going on. It's not clean and it stinks like hell. So, yeah, vegetables. So, I think we covered that pretty well. Produce no waste, and there's ways you can do that in the office, at your factory, wherever you work, or in college. Think about the waste you're making. Even putting on that sunscreen, it's going to end up in the river. Isn't that amazing? I mean, everything we use ends up in the river. Rainwater is some of the cleanest water there is. Once the first flush has come off the roof, it's cleaner than many municipal water systems. But you've got to store it. I'm not encouraging that, but I'm just saying, if you're ever in trouble, let it rain for a bit, then you can drink water off the roof if you're ever in trouble. Okay, design from patterns to details. This is a major thing we say in permaculture. By stepping back, we can observe the patterns in nature and society. These can form the backbone of our designs with the details filled in as we go. The backbone of what design? Well, if I had I have a nice property, it's 1/10 of an acre, and when I learned permaculture, I flew up to 30,000 feet, and I looked at my property, and you can take tracing paper, and you can do layers on your property. Oh, here are the built environment, here's the road, here's the sewer pipe perhaps, if you need to know. Here are the trees. Where is it open in summer? Because the garden in summer is different to the garden in winter. If you plan your garden, I know somebody who planned their garden in winter, and when it came to summer, everything was in shade. All their food was in shade, because they thought it was the same, but it's not. So you've got to watch for a year on any piece of ground if you do that. But designing from patterns to details, if you fly up to 30,000 feet, you can see the pattern of your land. And you can ask, where's the slope, where's the wet part? What is the pattern? What pattern would I like to see? Where should I put the path? How can I make it pleasing to my eye so I can live with it? What would nature do? How would nature design? Look what nature does. The tree above is almost the same as the tree below. Look at the root system. This one, you can see the root system below. You can turn it upside down, it almost look no different. Right? That's repeated in nature all over the place. Have you seen that? This is outside, this is across the road from me 2 winters ago. There's that root system again in the sky, really. And you know, there's this whole thing where it goes out to 5 and then 5, and it goes out and it goes out. There's a whole formula to how branches are formed. But what's it called? I go to the Fibonacci sequence. Have you heard of that? Fibonacci. Do you know it?
Well, I know it from quilting.
Oh.
When you quilt, they have certain numbers of things.
Okay.
It's a number concept.
It's a number. Yeah, it's a number
And
sequence.
it's in flowers too.
It's in flowers. it's in trees, it's in quilts.
Yes.
And this lady personally knows Fibonacci, you can talk to her later on. She's 300 years old. That's great. It's in quilting, what about that? So that's a whole sequence, you can look at that, and the whole pattern is there. And then, what about this little river up there in Egypt? There's the delta, there's the Nile Delta. Is that Fibonacci? Maybe, if you worked it out. Look, there it is, there's a leaf. See how the patterns in nature are there. The mathematicians love this. They can see all this. There's mathematical patterns within atoms, within a nucleus, which we don't normally know about if we're not in that field. But this we can see all the time. Look at the hands. Look at the veins on our hands. Is it repeated? Look closely when you're in the desert. Look closely when you're looking across at water falling down a hill. It will break up into these patterns. Probably gravity has some effect on it. But we like these patterns because they are from our world. We recognize them. When you go against nature, like some of those wicked buildings we built in the 70s and the 60s, what was it called? Industrial something?
Urban renewal.
Sorry?
Urban renewal.
Urban renewal. Concrete slabs of buildings that, that some people say even homeless people don't hang out by. They're just absolutely awful buildings because they don't belong here.
When you go to Alaska and you look at the glaciers and the waterfalls and how they're all coming down into the glaciers, that's where you can see a lot of this with just your own eyes.
Right. So this lady says in Alaska, I'll just repeat that, Alaska, in the waterfalls and the glaciers, you can see these patterns happening again. And because it's so stark, it probably jumps out at you.
Yes.
So design from patterns to details. Think about that in your life, in your design work, in your house, maybe in your garden. Look to nature for inspiration and fly up to 30,000 feet and go into the detail after. Don't start with the detail, come up with the pattern. It's a beautiful thing. Integrate rather than segregate. Put the right things in the right place. Relationships develop that work together. They're synergistic. They support each other. This is basically a garden from the 30s, beautifully laid out, very clear, very productive. But what they've done there is really bring the farm into the garden. This is a garden, not a farm. They brought the farm into the garden. We don't need to do that. The reason they do that in the farm is because they want machinery to go through the rows. Everything has to be in rows, there has to be gaps. You've got to be able to weed it. This is my garden. There's no weeds in that picture, believe it or not. It's all integrated. I plant tomatoes in 3 different places. I'm going to plant them all together because some bugs might enter one place and they won't get to the next one. I plant different varieties because each year I don't know which one's going to do the best. So, here there's some potatoes, or there were probably by this time. The potatoes are over, and I've planted winter squash to use up the land. There's mint here. There's some melon there. Everything is mixed up. I never plant the same thing in monoculture. So integrate rather than segregate. That's opposite to modern day industrial agriculture. Let me see if I've got anything else on that. Yeah, split the crops up to confuse the pests. Certain plants benefit other plants. We'll get onto that in a minute. There's companion planting. Tomato and basil work together. Funny enough, they taste good, but they also work together in the garden. Some things don't. Think about we've already talked about observing and interacting. Where's the south? Where's the north? Don't put the tall stuff at the south because you'll stop the sun coming through. So put the short stuff at the south and the tall stuff in the north. Interplant high nitrogen feeders with things that set nitrogen. So you could put beans next to cabbages, and the bean is pulling nitrogen from the air, and the bed over it is cabbage, and it's pulling the nitrogen across to the cabbage. So, flowers among the plants. Even I'm a bit mercenary, to be honest with you. You can't eat it. It's not in my yard. I tend not to plant too many flowers, but I've got echinacea, which is purple cone flower. I've got some sunflowers, and I've got my favorite, Asclepias tuberosa, which is the native butterfly flower. It's beautiful. It brings in the pollinators, and I've got mountain mint, which is native to our area. It brings in more pollinators than you can imagine. Plant flowers among your food to attract pollinators, so they come in and while they're pollinating the Asclepias, they're pollinating your cucumber or whatever. In England, they put beetle mounds even in farms. They'll leave a mound, hundreds of feet long, covered in grass, weeds, whatever, because the beetles live in there. And John, Paul, Ringo, and George. And there are thousands of species of beetles. They live in there, and when they are hungry, they go out into the crops. They sometimes destroy a little bit of the crop, maybe 5–10%, but they're also beneficial. There's more beneficials in nature than there are negatives. And they'll go out and they'll do some pest management for you in the crops. So they have beetle mounds, they call them. And hedgerows are like amazing places to hold on to the biology that you need, that we would destroy. Birds and all kinds of creatures, of course, live in the hedgerows, and you keep that. It's like a seed bank, only it's biology, insects, and they're all a lot of beneficials and so on. So integrate rather than segregate. And of course, in the primo permaculture system, which would be the food forest, everything will be integrated. The tall, the small, everything's there, right? And if you can, plant as many perennials as you can, so you're not planting every year. There's not a lot of perennial food we can plant, but I've got French sorrel in my garden, that's perennial.
Asparagus.
Asparagus is perennial. Anything else?
Rhubarb.
Sorry?
Rhubarb.
Rhubarb's perennial, if you
My
can
kale
take it.
was last year.
Yeah.
This way
Somehow my kale.
it keeps going
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah.
It'll go for a
Yeah.
couple of years.
Yeah.
Sometimes things aren't perennial, but they're self-seeding. I've got heirloom tomatoes. I don't have to plant tomatoes. You'll have to wait a bit longer, but they'll self-seed, and they'll come up every year. So plant heirlooms, and they'll be self-seeding. What else? I've got Egyptian onions. It's called walking onions. They kind of walk across the yard. They drop down and replant. Drop down and replant. They're a bit sharp, but they're the first thing up in spring, the gap month. We call it April. Most people starve in April in Europe in the old days. That's the gap month. You keep food over the winter, then April, you're waiting for the new harvest, and it's not there. That was the difficult time. So perennials are great like that because they grow so they love it where they are. You know, they're growing. What else have I got?
Raspberries?
Well, of course, all the fruits.
Yeah.
All the fruits are perennial, aren't they? Raspberries, blueberries, strawberries. I got peaches, apples, kiwi fruits growing in my yard. The right one will go through the winters. After 3 or 4 years, you'll get kiwis. I've got grapes. Yeah, the fruits are perennial. So that's good food, you know, plant perennial. Then you're integrate and not segregated. Next one is use small and slow solutions. Some of this comes out of, yes?
Sorry, just one more thing about you were talking about pests and beneficial insects.
Yeah.
How about like rodents? Do you have any problems with those, with all the vegetables you grow?
I don't have any rodent problems where I live.
Birds?
I used to have, well, I do have squirrel problems.
Oh.
The squirrels, because my garden is so productive in the middle of this kind of lawn desert,
Right.
which is my town. Everyone's got lawns and I've got food. Every creature within a mile knows that. Comes to my yard. I don't have trouble with actual rodents like rats and mice, but a rodent is a squirrel.
Right.
So the squirrel will sample things even though it doesn't eat them, right?
And dig them up.
Well,
Yes.
what would nature do?
Put a cat in your garden.
The lady's right. I don't like cats. I wouldn't keep one. But we have feral cats in Coatesville, and I was chasing them out of my yard because they will poop sometimes in your beds, you know.
Yeah, they do.
But one of them carried a squirrel across the garden.
There you
A
go.
squirrel hanging from its mouth. I said, "You can stay." I put some straw down. I made a few little beds, and it sleeps there now. And I get peaches to eat now. And it doesn't mess with my cucumbers. Oh yeah, what will nature do? It creates a predator, a cat. It keeps away the squirrels. And I also, squirrels will jump from tree to tree to tree, so you have to take one down so it gets stuck. And the cat goes up the peach tree after the squirrel. And now he knows that. He's like, he comes into the yard, he's like, oh, no more peaches, where's that cat? So it's really good, yeah. What will nature do? You have to think of that. That guy also probably you won't get too many rodents up on the ground unless you have this meat laying around and stuff like that from,
Rabbits.
you know.
Oh.
I don't have any rabbits. My yard is fenced off enough to prevent rabbits. Raised beds,
Chipmunks, people have a lot of trouble with chipmunks.
you usually get, they're very territorial, so you don't get many.
Which?
Chipmunks, this lady said chipmunks. I don't have a chipmunk.
Big ones, the woodchucks.
Yeah,
They-
woodchucks
They do damage.
or groundhogs are terrible. You can't tolerate one. If there was one in my yard, there's
You can bring dogs in.
I'm very
Really big cat.
I'm very compassionate, but I would put a smoke bomb down the hole of a groundhog. You can buy them from Home Depot, it's called Revenge. Because the groundhog will wipe your whole food system out in a day. So you can't tolerate groundhog.
Yeah.
And you can't keep him out.
And they travel.
Yeah, they travel.
They-
So if there was one anywhere near me, he wouldn't live very long. I'm sorry. I'm not doing all this work for the groundhog. I just can't. So,
Yeah.
you know. Let's see, I'm going the wrong way. No. Use small and slow solutions. Why would we do that? Well, we don't want to invest everything in something and then find it doesn't work, because sometimes we're in new territory. In fact, many of us are. You know, we're industrial people now, although we're post-industrial actually. So we're gonna relocalize our food system. We're gonna do that. Watch and see. I just read a report from Penn State. Wherever there's a organic hotspot, the median wage goes up $2,000 in a family. Not because it's wealthy, but because of the organic production. It's a very good study. I don't have the link, I should have got that for you. But it's, use small and slow solutions. Try something on a small scale first, accept the feedback before scaling up. Haste makes waste. Good management, you'll find you don't need so many fertilizers or pesticides. Planning ahead, testing. This is called systems thinking, by the way. Permaculture is systems thinking. Most things in the colleges are silos. Everybody's in their silo. There's a lot of opportunity being lost, a lot of innovation being lost because no one's taking all that research and mixing it together. PowerPoints are actually not that great because they come up on the screen, plonk, plonk. If I took this whole PowerPoint and made pictures of it here, you'd be going, oh look, that connects to that, this connects to this. You see, we've got to think systems thinking. It's no good, it's not enough. They say, don't give a person fish, teach them to fish. It's not enough to teach them to fish anymore. We've messed with the world too much. Now you have to teach the person about the system the fish swims in. I'm sorry to complicate life, but it's like in my town there's a steel mill. If you fish south of the steel mill, you're probably going to die. If you fish north of the steel mill, you might live. You might just get cancer slower, but whatever. You've got to learn about the system you live in. We all have to fly up to 30,000 feet and look at the system. Systems thinking helps calculate the right scale and the speed at which a system is most efficient, using the smallest solution for the best result. We tend to build cars with 5-liter engines, 500 horsepower. Do you know what percentage of the car carries you? The energy? Anybody know the percentage? It's 1%. 1% of the energy you burn carries you in the car. 99% carries the car. Oh, we're really smart, we humans, aren't we? All that fossil fuel is to carry that ton or 2 tons steel. Think about it. The car's 300 horsepower. How many horses do you need to go down the road? You've got 200 to 300 horses out in front of your car. Are we smart? Well, we got to think about this. We've got to step back and think about it. We can have the same abundance we have with less. We can create this wonderful world with less and smarter. We've really just cheapness and easy is just. We didn't question what we were doing. Use and value diversity, a little bit like the other one, which we did was, what was the other word? Integrate rather than segregate. Very similar, but actually quite a lot of nice things. Use and value diversity. Diversity reduces vulnerability to threats, taking advantage of the unique nature of the environment. Nature has tremendous diversity, lots of surplus. We like very efficient systems. Our food system is so efficient now, there's 3 days food in the supermarket if anything goes wrong. There's no big warehouse out here with all the food stuff. It's very efficient. But when efficiency breaks down, you stop. Nature is not very efficient. It's diverse, and the reason it's diverse and it has so much surplus in its system is because it knows things go wrong. It's had 3 billion years to figure this out. So when something dies or falls, there's another one coming up. It's ready to go. Sometimes efficiency isn't good in certain places. So always grow several varieties of plant, put them in different locations. Think about things like that. Value diversity in people, in places. If you're in a think tank and there's no one from a certain race there or a certain language group, you probably won't have the best solution. If it's all the same kind of person in your think tank, you want the best solution you can come up with. You'll get ideas from all over the place, young and old. You know, children will say something and you think, oh my God, we have to integrate that. A 10-year-old will shout something. So diversity, value it, use and value diversity in all its forms, in all its ways, and we'll have better systems. Use edges and value the margin. What's an edge? Well, look at this round pond. A pond in nature is rarely round, very rare, right? So why is that? Because the edge is where the action is. The edge is the most productive place in any system. So if you make a pond and you made it like this, you've probably got 3 times the edge that that has. So the rabbit can come and drink here. The groundhog can drink there. The snake can drink here. There's all these little aquatic plants around all the edges. Food for something. Food for insects. Creating biology, creating biodiversity. Little sneaky places here the fish could come up and hide from the cat. Or places, shade. There's shade up here. There might be nutrition in here that isn't out there. So flower beds, hedgerows, if you can create, I believe, and I can't verify this, but I believe Google creates edge. I did read once that when you go into the canteen, it turns the cafeteria. The line turns and turns and turns back on itself. They've created edge. Why? I'm walking this way, you're walking that way. And I say to you, what? I saw you the other day up in financing. Are you in financing? You say, no, I'm in design. I say, oh, what kind of design? And you say, oh, I'm in so-and-so. I'll be walking along and I say, well, I need a designer down in so-and-so. We're doing a cover for the new CD or whatever. You know. And so when you create edge, you create creativity. We get to know each other. We look each other in the eye. And we can ask, what do you do? What do you do? I saw you with I see you got a new so-and-so in the parking lot here. And so you create this community. You create community. You revalue community. So the edge is usually where the productivity is. In a forest, if you've ever been into a jungle, the edge is almost impossible to get through. And everybody thinks the jungles are like that. But actually, once you get through the edge of the jungle, it's very easy to walk through. There's paths from animals in there. There's often not as much growth. You can move a lot easier in a large jungle as you can out in the field. But at the edge, it's so productive. There's so much going on. You can't get through it. It's the same with people drive into places like Coatesville, where I live, which is very poor, very dysfunctional. But there's edge there. There's people living next to each other. Fashion people driving to see what people are doing, because we don't care so much. We wear our pajamas in the street. Now everybody's wearing pajamas in the street. Right? they go and see what kind of, you got your pants hanging down your waist, because you're sympathizing with prisoners because they take the belt off when you go to prison. That's where some of that came from. But now they're designing pants which are really long and so people drive around to see where the edge is, the edges in some of these communities where the two interface, and you get creativity with cars. You get all kinds of cars in Coatesville that are amalgams of God knows what, spaceships and cars. So it's the edge which is productive. So use edges and value the marginal. Right, so this is the final one. Creatively use and respond to change. Creatively use and respond to change. we can have a positive impact when we see change happening. If we are aware of it, say, oh, there's some change, but I like change. Wait a minute, maybe it's good. Maybe we can direct this change. Maybe we can intervene. So I told you about a problem with the maple seedling in the hedgerow. Turn a problem into the solution. First I used the sticks, but before I used the sticks, I put on a leather glove and I took all the leaves off. Because I've got such a tiny property, I don't have much nitrogen. Those leaves are nitrogen at that point. By the time they dry out and stuff, they become more carbon-like. But I use them in mulch in the middle of summer. I use Norway, those Norway maple leaves are going to be mulch on my garden. So the problem is the solution. So I use the sticks for the hugelkultur container. I put those on the garden. So, you know, always look, when change happens, say, how can I direct this? Is this good? Is this more productive than what I had before? Here's a change. You're walking around your garden, suddenly there's this tomato horn. That's actual size, by the way. This is where I find it. This is where I find out if everybody's awake. That's actual size. Tomato, the hornworm, caterpillar. If you leave 5 of those on your tomatoes, your tomatoes will probably be destroyed in the morning. So you can't leave them. But nature's integrated pest control. If you learn about the system that you're living in, what's happened to this particular one? Do you know what's happened? There's 5 of them, nice and green and nasty. You've got to take them off and squish them or give them to the birds. What's happened to this? Sorry?
He fell in some rice.
Yeah, this guy fell in my rice pot.
Now he's getting sucked away.
Actually, he got parasiticized by a wasp. This guy got parasiticized by a wasp. That's wasp eggs. The parasiticized wasp egg. There's 100 eggs on there. You don't take him off. She's a goner anyway, right? You can have 100 parasitic wasps in the yard in about 2 weeks. And they're going to live in your yard because they don't fly very far. And they're going to parasitize any more of these guys that come into your yard, right? You've just created a pest control mechanism because you knew what that was. Learn about your system. Be conscious of it. Don't take that one off. I haven't had these kinds of guys for 3 years since I took that picture. So they're going out parasiticizing caterpillars and God knows what. Wasps are carnivores. They mainly eat other pests. So although they can sting bad, bees take pollen and nectar and so on. Wasps are carnivores mainly. So if you know your system, thank you. You just got some pest control, integrated pest control. What else? Creatively use and respond to change. This is my neighbor's yard, and this is my yard. That's the grass that's dying because of the Japanese beetle, he said. But it's not. He just mowed it to death. He mowed it to death. And all my water, as I said off the roof earlier, is coming onto my land. I'm not actually watering this. It's just coming up different places. I'm just distributing it. So it's green. It's alive. There's food growing here. There's a grapevine there. There's food growing here, fruit bed. This is a soil sterilizer, solar soil sterilizer that I made. So I make my own potting soil by sterilizing the soil with solar heat. Because again, you want to kill all the potting soil has been raised to 160 degrees for half an hour, so to kill off the pathogens and seeds, so that you don't have competition when you plant things. Anyway, as a solar thing. Here's my peach tree, so on. So creatively use and respond to change. What the change there is water, the seasons, and you can do this. Again, nature dislikes bare soil, hence weeds. What would nature do? Nature puts leaves. I go across the road to that big Norway maple I showed earlier, and I pick up all the leaves and people drive by. Hey buddy, stop doing the city's work. And another neighbour will shout out, leave him alone, that's next year's groceries. This is what happened last. So I bring all the leaves from the trees around me, because I don't have many, and I sprinkle them on the garden as a kind of mulch for the winter. Sometimes I have to clean them up, but a lot of them break down. If you have too many leaves, you can put them in a garbage container, put a mask on, put a protective eye on, and put your weed whacker in there, go zzz, zzz, and you'll bring them all down to powder. You can sprinkle that all over the garden. That's nutrition. Right? So again, creatively use and respond to change. The season has changed, so I'm doing what nature does. I'm creating mulch. There's the compost heap getting ready to go, getting it to its yard, and cleaning up and so on. In the fall, what does nature do? It leaves things behind. Don't clean up too much. Don't clean up too much, because nature doesn't expect you to clean up. It doesn't clean up. There's something there. Can you see something there? See, if I clean this up too much, this was a Virginia creeper. There's just something there that nature's left behind. If I pick this one up and throw it in the compost heap, that won't be there. And there it is, magnified. Anybody know what that is?
I do.
Hmm?
Praying mantis.
It's a praying mantis cocoon. There's probably 100 praying mantises in there. Integrated pest management. If I leave those, they're gonna come out in the spring. Actually, I did take it down because it was so obvious. I thought the birds would eat it. I put it in a plastic bag and I put it in the bottom of the fridge. And I took it out in May and I put a peg around it. I cut there and I pegged it back. The praying mantises came out. I kept it in the fridge for the winter. Oh, because we had that awful February where it went up to 70 degrees.
Yeah.
Those guys would have come out, no food, nothing, died. So I put it in the fridge. That's why I did it. I can't remember why. You can put them in the fridge, but don't take them out and put them in on the counter because 100 praying mantises crawling around them. Creatively use and respond to change as you see it happening. And if we apply permaculture principles across sustainable human settlements, it might look a little bit like this. Obviously food will be affected, shelter will be designed differently. Water, we'll do something with that. Water's going to be a big problem. Clothing might be different, transport, energy. You see all these things that make up a human settlement. If we apply these principles in these areas, we will do it differently. We will create the sustain age. And our resources will stay with us. And maybe if, in one example, I made this poster, a vision of a sustainable hospital with some permaculture principles added in. So, have you ever said to somebody, I'll meet you at the hospital for lunch? Anybody ever done that? No way! The worst food in the world is in hospitals. No wonder people die. But look, here's a hospital restaurant serving locally grown food from its surroundings. This is, I call this hospital-supported agriculture. You've heard of CSA, community-supported agriculture. This is hospital-supported agriculture. There's 20 acres around every hospital in the country. Turn it into a farm. Sell the food, grow the food, eat it in the restaurant. The hospital restaurant employs a popular chef. Now I might say to you, I'll meet you at the hospital restaurant. There's a great chef up there, and it's all fresh produce from around their hospital. Look at that. Solar panels on the roof, One of my friends, her father was dying in hospital. Nowhere to take him in the wheelchair. Nowhere. Just hallways, right? She could have wheeled him out here. He'd have loved it. This is regenerative. Nature makes you feel good, makes you feel young. It's natural to us, even if you're not that kind of person. We love green. Everybody loves green. Farm to patient food. So if we apply the principles, we might do things differently. And in that case, permaculture will have gone out into the society, which I hope it will a little bit today, talking to you. You'll be able to think about these principles, take the card with you, read the principles over and over, and just keep them consciously in front of you when you do things, and we might have a more sustainable world. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Question for you. Considering all your solar ideas and the solar light, have you ever tried to extend your growing season here in this area, by using specific ideas?
The lady says, have I tried to extend the growing season because of my solar ideas? Well, you saw my solar porch. That first of all helps me to grow food through the winter. But with covers, plastic covers, you can extend your season by 6 weeks easily, 3 weeks on each end. You could just put plastic over a couple of hoops. Just put some stones around. It's amazing how that will allow you to grow earlier and certainly allow you to grow later. The funny thing is, we're 30 miles, 40 miles from Philadelphia. Philadelphia has a growing season about 2 months longer than us.
Wow.
2 months late. Can you believe that? Their last frost date is 4 weeks earlier than us because of the island effect, the heat effect from all that stone. Amazing. Philadelphia has 2 months growing season longer. you can create that to some extent. If you have a greenhouse, put some barrels of water so the sun comes in. But really, a piece of plastic stretched over some conduit, plastic conduit from the hardware store is usually about as far as most people want to go. And it's amazing how that can keep that broccoli going or that thing, whatever it is later into the season. Yeah. And you can do microgreens too. I don't know if you know about microgreens. You can buy the seeds, half an inch of soil in a tray, sprinkle microgreen seeds, any seeds, you can buy them, water them for 7 days, you'll have a harvest, you'll have something for a sandwich, it'll cost you $5 to buy that tray in the health food store. So microgreens for the winter. Look into that. I have a video at tonyfixit.com, YouTube/TonyFixit. There's quite a few of my videos on YouTube. Tony Buck, B-U-C-K. Look there, you'll see some ideas.
And have you ever heard of winter sewing? I go to this website, it's called Garden for Your House, I think it is.
Okay.
And this guy specializes in winter sewing, in milk cartons. He cuts them halfway,
Okay.
fills them with the soil and seeds, and then he just sits them out on a table
Yeah.
in the middle of winter. He closes them up, of course, and at the top,
Yeah.
you can open, take off. And we've been my girlfriend and I have been very successful in starting seeds,
Okay.
over the winter.
Yeah, you can start seeds over the winter. What happens in the winter is that the daylight is 6 to 7 hours. Right now it's 15 hours. So you've got to get everything grown by October in Pennsylvania. But if you can get everything grown, like cabbages and broccolis, they'll sit there for months. They don't move, but they won't grow very much from October onwards. So you get people who want food for the winter, grow it up, especially in greenhouses, or cover it with plastic, and as much as they can by October. You can start seeds and you'll get small plants in winter. They'll come up because they've got so much vitality, but they won't get very far. And actually those plastic bottles you talk about putting on top, plants can cook in there. You get a very sunny day in winter, and we get fantastically sunny days. It can get to 100 degrees under that plastic container. And if the plant's quite big, it will die.
Yeah, we open ours up.
Got to be on top of it. The lady says she opens the thing up. You've got to be on top of that kind of gardening if you do plastic covers. My back porch gets to 80 to 90 degrees in the worst winter day. And I suck that into the living room. So I know how hot it gets, and as it progresses into the spring, it can get to 110 degrees on my porch in no time. So you've got to be ready if you're doing winter growing using plastics or stuff. I totally encourage it, especially if it's passive and you're not using extra heat or light. But you've got to be on top of it, because you can cook your plants, even in winter. Okay.
What do you do with all the stuff that you don't eat that comes from your garden?
What do I do with all the stuff that I don't eat? I either dry it, I preserve it, or I give it to my neighbors. I share it with neighbors. Yeah, I do. So,
Is there a certain type of seeds that you like?
for what?
Well, do you like burpee seeds, do you like pine tree, do you like?
I try and buy
seeds
heirloom seeds for most of the things that I want to
So
grow.
then you save them.
Heirloom. I don't always say, I do save them, but sometimes they'll self-seed. So if a few tomatoes fall in the garden, they'll self-seed. So buy heirloom seeds when you can. And grow what you like to eat. Not what people say should grow around here, grow what you like to eat. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.